here on the African continent and beyond. 60 minutes of news, voices, perspectives, and of course something to also warm your heart. Tell us where you're listening from. We'd like to share it with the rest of the viewers to let them know what is happening outside of their worlds. That is worth talking about. That is topical. So share it with us on 0634069126. That's where you can send your WhatsApp voice messages to, and you can also reach us on the socials at Channel Africa 1. That's on TikTok, on Instagram, as well as X, and we are on Facebook. Just simply go to Channel Africa to speak to us. Here's a look now at your top stories. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa will embark on a working visit to the United States of America from the 19th to the 22nd of May 2025. President Ramaphosa will meet with President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington, D.C. to discuss bilateral, regional and global issues of interest. The president's visit to the U.S. provides a platform to reset the strategic relationship between the two countries. More from Kate Fisher in Washington.
It's really the lowest point in the relationship between South Africa and the US, really since the end of apartheid. We've had the dismissal of the South African ambassador to the US, the end of US foreign aid to South Africa, US President Donald Trump claiming that South Africa is engaged in white genocide. So some really difficult subjects to be talking about in the Oval Office next week, not to mention the trade issue between the two countries also needs to be sorted out. So a lot on the agenda. I think that we'll all be watching to see just how Cyril Ramaphosa deals with this situation.
And we speak about this issue that's also been topical, that we've been watching South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, lambasting some health experts and media reports that suggest that South Africa's HIV/AIDS program is in a state of collapse. Motsoaledi says his department is in talks with potential funders to close the gap left by the cessation of the PEPFAR funding by the United States government.
It is inconceivable that out of 46.8 billion rand spent by the country on HIV/AIDS program, the withdrawal of 7.9 billion by President Trump will immediately lead to a collapse of the entire program. We believe it's inconceivable. Ladies and gentlemen, we must put it categorically clear that under no circumstances will we allow this massive work performed over a period of more than a decade and a half to collapse and go up in smoke because President Trump has decided to do what he has done. But I also want to state clearly that propagating wrong information about the status of the HIV/AIDS campaign in South Africa in the manner that is being done is no different from the approach adopted by AfriForum and its ilk, which led Trump to thrash the whole country.
And in other news now, we tell you about this. Some opposition parties in Zambia have accused the current administration of politically and economically collapsing the country. They say there is a need for a change of government in that country that will address pertinent issues such as the high rate of unemployment, lack of infrastructure, and the deteriorating education system. Zambia is heading to general elections next year and is also faced with debt crisis, resulting in the failure of debt servicing. Zambia's Must Prosper President Calvin Fubie-Bwalya.
Well, the political climate in Zambia today has deteriorated to levels where the Zambian people are feeling that there is need for a change of government. Secondly, in Zambia today, we have a very serious leadership crisis. The current president of the country is a person I can describe as one who got into power, for lack of a better word, by misrepresentation. All the promises that he gave the Zambian people during his campaign were based on lies. everything that is said has turned out to be a lie. He basically defrauded the Zambians into voting for him because of the many lies that he told.
And finally, we continue with news on Zambia, but this time about the president. A high-powered Chinese delegation is in that country to fast-track implementation of agreements reached between Zambia and China. The delegation, led by chairperson of the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, Erkin Tunkias, met with the Zambian president, Hakainde Hichilema, at State House in Lusaka today.
Advancements through your research and development, early maturing, high yielding, is very important to our own project, Mulungushi Textiles, which we are doing a cotton outgrown with a factory that we jointly own between China and Zambia in our Kabwe region of Zambia. So we would like to exploit, Minister, a deeper relationship at my team here on their expertise on areas such as the cotton growing, processing, and all of those issues that will make our joint business, Zambia, China, successful.
And now it brings the time to 8 minutes past 9. Just a reminder, you can speak to us via social media and you can listen to us live on the DSTV audio. Okay, we are on channel 802 if you want to dial in on OpenView channel 628 is where to go, and of course so you can also download the SABC Plus app and watch us live.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
All right, at 9 minutes past 9, let's go to our top story now. That's Human Rights Watch saying the Israeli government's plan to demolish what remains of Gaza's civilian infrastructure and concentrate the Palestinian population into a tiny area would amount to an abhorrent escalation of its ongoing crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing and acts of genocide. Israeli authorities, who have blocked the entry of aid, food, fuel and medical supplies into Gaza for 75 days now, have reportedly decided on a plan on what would include flattening buildings and displacing Gaza's entire population into a single humanitarian area. For more on this, we are joined on the line from The Hague by Federico Borello, who is Interim Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. A very good evening to you. Chilling stuff just as I'm reading that. So just tell us a little bit more of this plan by Israel, and has it categorically said that it believes that its actions will be legal?
Yes. So this plan has been mentioned by several high-level Israeli officials who have said that if there is no deal by the time that President Trump leaves the region, which is tomorrow, they will go ahead with this plan that they named Gideon's Chariots. And they have not said whether or not it's legal. They just said that they would go forward with it. However, it is apparent and clear that this would be illegal under international law and constitute, as you said, a continuation of the crimes that we've seen.
And I ask that because, well, one might question the morality of it, as certainly it has, because it has used the excuse, the reasoning that they are preserving and protecting Israeli statehood. But just even to use the terms that it will flatten buildings and ensure that it corrals the Gaza population into one humanitarian area. And if you could please, for those who've never seen it, who've never been it, just describe just how small an area we are already talking of where the people of Gaza inhabit.
Yeah. So there's, around 2 million people in the Gaza Strip remaining. And the Israeli government has at every time given order of evacuation to people to move into much narrower areas. It already would be overpopulated if they could live in the Gaza Strip. It was already overpopulated before the war, but they keep concentrating people and telling people they have to go north and then they have to go south. And then we have also documented that when they gave these orders, they were even killing people and shooting people, and they were sending them to small areas where there was no electricity, no water. So the purported purpose of protecting the population from the fighting was not what we found. We find that this is a continuation of the crimes that are committed against the civilian population. And it's already a very tiny area. It is unimaginable to think that they would destroy almost the entirety of Gaza and leave just a small part for the population to inhabit.
There obviously has been diplomatic support for Israel, which is why there has been a defense of its actions by being critical of those who even term what is happening in Gaza as a genocide, even though Israel admittedly bombs schools, clinics, any possible so-called humanitarian area it can find in order to, as it says, rout out Hamas leaders and those it deems terrorists. But President Trump's visit to the region, is it expected to achieve much by way of a ceasefire that is tangible?
Well, we haven't seen any sign of that. He has been in other parts of the region, and we have not seen the parties move closer to a ceasefire. In fact, we have seen an escalation by Israel of the bombing of Gaza after it unilaterally broke the ceasefire that, as you remember, was there until a few months ago. So there is nothing that we can see that would tell us that by tomorrow, when President Trump is leaving, we're going to have a ceasefire. In fact, it unfortunately seems that there is an escalation of the violence against the Palestinian population in Gaza.
And Saudi Arabia, from Human Rights Watch's perspective, what role do you foresee it playing?
Well, Saudi Arabia, like all other regional parties, have a role to play in the negotiations, but most importantly, they have a role to uphold international law. And so, like the Western countries that are supporting Israel, such as Germany, France, the US, the UK, everyone needs to stop selling weapons to Israel, needs to cooperate with the International Criminal Court for the execution of the arrest warrants that have been issued against Israeli and Hamas officials, and needs to review its trade agreements with Israel to put pressure for human rights to be respected and for the survival of the entire Palestinian population.
And just referring back to this operation that they are seeking to launch, I understand it's called Gideon's Chariot. It is seeking the release of Israeli hostages, that is Israel, and of course quite a number of demands that it's made. Or else it says it will forcibly displace much of the Palestinian population. Has there been a move by any of the regional partners to say they will step in, irrespective of what means they need to make, to prevent Israel from doing this?
So first of all, the holding of hostages by Hamas is an ongoing war crime. All hostages should be immediately released by Hamas, as well as all the Palestinians that are unjustly and illegally detained in Israel should also be released. The goal of a military operation does not justify the commission of war crimes, crimes against humanity, or acts of genocide. Where we at Human Rights Watch have no position on what goals a government or another should have. Our position is that whatever their goals are, they must respect the rules of international law that are enshrined in conventions and in international humanitarian law. And we have not seen any statement in the last couple of days asking the Israeli to stop to basically put a pause on this plan, given that it's manifestly illegal and it will have dire consequences on a population that is already on the brink of starvations.
I mean, we spoke about the fact that it has targeted and prevented from reaching into Gaza aid resources and the protection of civilians, even in some of those camps. But as the International Court of Justice sits, and I'm just thinking, it is having a conversation. It is basically just talking about whether or not Israel needs to be held to account on whether or not it is committing acts of genocide. I mean, that has been very long legal arguments around it. But what it is suggesting with this latest operation sounds to me like pretty much extermination of a people. Would this not be something that would galvanize the international community, including those who are speaking at the International Court? Because Israel does not even recognize that process that is underway, to actually say, well, if you want proof, here is proof that this is what Israel intends to do.
Well, one would hope so. And in fact, we at Human Rights Watch do not invoke the Genocide Convention lightly. And we have said today that the governments that are supporting Israel have a duty under the Genocide Convention to prevent genocide. The head of OCHA, UN humanitarian chief, has said the same, has talked about the need to prevent genocide. So whether or not genocide has been committed already, and that is something that the International Court of Justice, as you said, has been asked to clarify, there is definitely the possibility that this would be committed, and that therefore there is an obligation, particularly on the US, France, UK, Germany, the states that are supporting Israel, to intervene as members of the Genocide Convention to prevent it from happening.
So when the Israeli forces talk about the Rafah model, what exactly does that mean? That they have now established it as something that is systemic, that could be operationalized at any point?
Yes, in fact, it's chilling to hear about the Rafah model because it does bring to mind the operations that were in Rafah that led to the massive and systematic destruction of infrastructure, and that is basically necessary for the civilian population to survive. We have documented in December the systematic deprivation of water for Palestinian civilians by destroying water infrastructure, by preventing the access to water, preventing the running of desalination plants. And we have concluded that those were acts of genocide because they were leading to the extermination of the Palestinian population, and we are seeing a continuation of those crimes today.
Your expectations or your fears as Human Rights Watch over the next couple of days, as President Donald Trump wraps up his visit to the Middle East and heads back home, ironically, for a sit-down session with our President Cyril Ramaphosa, who, of course, we know is leading the charge at the International Court of Justice.
Yes, so the expectations is that the countries that are members of the Genocide Convention and those who are members of the International Criminal Court finally wake up. There must be a red line. There must be a point where they say, this is enough. You cannot continue. And the tangible sanctions, the tangible threats of this kind of sanctions, like suspending trade agreements, that would cause Israel to pause. The suspension of arms transfer. This is complicity. The risk for these government officials to be complicit in war crimes, crimes against humanity, and potentially genocide is there. And we're hoping that with the details of this plan coming, becoming public, that these governments, the members of these governments, really rethink their policies and bring Israel back from the brink on these plans.
Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing us the latest update with us. Frederico Borrello, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, speaking to us from The Hague. It's 22 minutes past 9. You are listening to Africa World Hour. Welcome to it. If you've just joined us, I am Tsipiso Makwetla. So lots to get through this evening. Let's tell you about some of what's happening in South Africa. The Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, says the South African government expects the highest level of decorum from U.S. President Donald Trump. President Ramaphosa will visit America next week. Misinformation on land grabs, white genocide, and the emigration of 49 Afrikaners will be on the agenda when the two leaders meet. The names of the delegates who will accompany President Ramaphosa to the U.S. will also be made public in due course, she says. Bahle Mota reports.
Following months of increased tensions from the United States against South Africa, President Ramaphosa and Trump will finally meet in Washington, D.C. Since taking office, Trump has signed executive orders against South Africa and expelled former ambassador to the U.S., Ebrahim Rasool. With baseless accusations, Trump continues to tell a tale of alleged land grabs and a white genocide against the country's minority white population. Speaking to the media in Tshwane on Thursday, Minister in the Presidency Khumbudzo Ntshavheni assessed that Trump will be on his best behavior during his meeting with President Ramaphosa.
It doesn't mean we'll agree in all matters, we'll differ, but we believe that our relationship with the U.S. is mutually beneficial. There are more than 600 U.S. companies here in the country. Part of their largest automakers are in the country. Part of their biggest electronics and telecoms companies are also big investors in these countries, whether it's Google, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Microsoft. They are here.
It is still unknown who President Ramaphosa will take with him to the U.S. next week. Minister Ntshavheni says the prerogative to announce the delegation rests with President Ramaphosa. She adds that the South African government will also present the U.S. with an investment package.
As the president has indicated, there will be a deal. They will offer a package, will negotiate a package, and that package will be a package that is also beneficial to South Africa. We cannot work against the interest of South Africa and its people.
On Sunday, 49 disgruntled Afrikaners left South Africa after being granted refugee status in the U.S. However, Ntshavheni maintained government stance that there is no genocide against white farmers.
There is no violence against farmers, and actually you must also go into that list and check how many of those people are actually farmers, because the argument is that there is genocide against white farmers in South Africa. Somebody has to be committed. He has a problem of explaining the genocide, and we wonder what they will say to the American administration when they do not meet the thousands and thousands of Afrikaner farmers to leave South Africa, and what they will be saying.
Due to Ramaphosa's visit to the U.S. coinciding with Enoch Godongwane's budget speech, he will attend it virtually. I am Sibahle Mota in Tshwane.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And it brings the time to 25 minutes past 9. Long-haul South African bus operator Intercape has been under siege by criminal elements for years, with the group tied up in litigation with the South African Police Service to do something about it. The group has been appealing for action for the government after recording hundreds of incidents where its drivers and operations were attacked and threatened, mainly in the Western Cape and Eastern Cape province. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Intercape CEO Johan Ferreira. Very good evening to you, Mr. Ferreira. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
A very good evening to you too.
So just tell us about this. If you find yourselves at a point where you even need armed assistance or bodyguards, so to speak, for your operations to be viable, what is behind this violence or attacks on your operations?
obviously, these attacks started in 2016, and then it got violent in 2019, with the stoning and shootings at the coaches. And it was done by taxi operators and taxi associations, specifically in the Eastern Cape, where they were questioning the validity of the Eastern Cape permits. But later on, it escalated to the effect that they started to block the coaches, and we couldn't operate. And obviously, if a bus is stoned and it's got the front windscreens, no side windscreens, or passengers are, shot, injured, drivers are injured when they open fire, then, we can't operate like that. And so the taxi associations want us to only operate on certain times, with only certain amount of buses, only certain routes, and we have to charge fares that they prescribe to us. So essentially, you've got to hand over the management and the running of the business to the taxi operators. That's basically what they want. And if you don't do that, then obviously they come after you with violence. That's when we went and we turned to the police.
What's the record of the number of attacks, and if lives lost or injuries occurred during this?
Look, we have recorded over 200 cases, and these cases vary from murder, attempted murder, extortion, racketeering, collusion, intimidation, stoning, shootings, attacking our depots, and so on and so forth. And I've just heard the deputy, let me just see, I think he's the deputy commissioner, police commissioner, General Sabia. And he was making comments about a reporter questioning him about the allegations that the council made in front of the portfolio committee and that I've made. And, obviously he denies it. He said, no, well, arrest has been made. Now, we can't verify it because the court instructed the police to inform Intercape and the court about the progress. They've never done that. And over and above that, the court also instructed in another judgment that the police should formulate, together with the Department of Transport, a plan of protection, short-term and long-term. And they must bring it to court, they must inform Intercape. They've not done so. So, for the police to come say, well, we've made arrest, why have they not complied with the court order? He's just made a comment and said, well, there was a warrant out and then the guy died and that was the end of it. But there's over 200. Okay, 11 out of 200 doesn't move the needle, unfortunately. Maybe in the world of the police, but in the eye of the public, it's a disgrace.
And you say you've recorded over 200, they say in the region of 76. I'm just wondering, not as a, questioning of why this is happening to you, but to your mind, what has led you to be in the crosshairs with, and it sounds like a mafia type operation, because you mentioned there's murder, attempted murder, racketeering, etc. So are you operating on lucrative routes?
Well, we operate for the last 45 years in South Africa, and we operate throughout South Africa. We also operate cross-border. So, we operate all kinds of routes, and we service the whole of South Africa, not a particular grouping of people. And but this is racketeering. This is mafia-style operations. This is organized crime. This is a way for the taxi operators to get the buses off the road or to buy buses themselves and then put them on the road. And we've seen that happen in the Eastern Cape. The taxi operator or owner that was instigating and actually running the meeting when a group of intercity bus operators in South Africa were gathered some 2 years ago in East London. This particular person was successful in stopping all operations of intercity operators in 5 different towns in the Eastern Cape. And the moment he got that right, he bought himself buses and started to operate these services. And he's still operating these services, and he's sitting in jail, and he's up for murder, as I believe for unlicensed guns as well.
The backstory and the reports that we get in South Africa about the taxi industry and its muscle. And I say muscle because it almost reads and views like a movie story, some type of gangster rough and tumble story. Are you not afraid, not only as a CEO of Intercape, but those in your industry who seem to be competing with the taxi industry? And what kind of things happen behind the scene for you to feel that, it's a matter of life and death to actually run this business?
We pray every day. As a company, 8 o'clock, we come together countrywide, all the offices and depots, and we pray. We pray to God for his protection, and then we take courage and when to go do our job. It's easy to leave, to pack up and leave. I can sell the business and I can move to another country, take my family and move. But that's not the solution. That is not the solution. And the president needs to understand that he has let down South Africa big time. And the people of South Africa are in fear. It's not only Intercape. The general public are in fear in the townships areas, in the inner city areas. You drive on highways, they spike the roads. You hear about murders every day, but the South Africans has become statistics. If an international tourist gets murdered, for instance, take the wrong turn off, gets murdered, then 2 days later, the perpetrator are apprehended. If a politician's child or family member gets murdered, then they're all there. And within 3-4 days, they find the person. But when an ordinary South African gets murdered, like we see on a daily basis, and thousands getting murdered throughout the year, it's just another person that died. And I think the people, the public of South Africa is tired of the police not doing their work and not enjoying the necessary support that they should get from government. I've not heard Ramaphosa speak out on this matter. I've not heard him. I've not heard Creasy speak out. I've not heard the Minister of Police spoke out. We just had this commissioner, deputy commissioner, and defending his position. And I challenge him. I challenge him to a debate. I'll debate him tomorrow because it's nonsense.
But so as you say, the criminal justice system seems to be the problem. And I'm just wondering about the complicity of police in some of these operations, because we've had stories of people being paid off, of bribery, of fraud, etc. So it does suggest that it's a more murkier ground than we imagine, that there's a lot more that is going on behind the scenes. Is it just simply down to greed, or does it lend itself to other crimes being committed?
Everyone is in on it, from top to bottom. Everyone. Just follow the money. Just follow the money. Just follow the money from the taxi organizations. Follow it through to the rugby clubs. Check how the nations get made to political parties. Follow the money. Just follow the money. You're an investigative journalist. Follow the money, you'll get the answers.
But do you have an idea on what those answers are?
I have a fair idea. I have a fairly good idea.
And is it just a national problem? Is it regional?
It's a national problem. It's a South African problem. The mafia-style operation in South Africa is eating South Africa like a cancer. It's eating it from the inside, and everyone is in on it. It is billions of rands.
And the reason I say is it just a national problem, because I don't think organized crime is just a South African problem. It is an international problem. South Africa has unfortunately been a breeding ground for it. It has been vulnerable to it. So I'm just trying to understand that, people see it as just a problem within the taxi industry. But for me, the level of fear that is garnered and the types of attacks where even the taxi industry itself has been used and manipulated to act as hired assassins, as we've seen in some high-profile cases. That's why I'm asking, from what you see, what do you think is going on? Yes, it's for investigative journalists to find out, but it's for industry to also share the light on just how far this problem goes.
Yeah, look, I will tell you that, before all of this, I had the idea that we were safe in South Africa, that I was safe, that my family's safe, that the business, the people, the passengers. And if something happens, you call the police, right? And then the police are supposed to come and protect. They have to come and arrest and protect and put people behind bars. That's the general idea. But that is far from what's happening. You can phone the police, they will come out. If they come out in time, they will look at the crime being committed. I was at the Cape Town station where the whole of Cape Town station was held hostage by the taxi operators. We had 2 colonels from the police there and other police members. 4 hours. 4 hours. Everything came to a standstill. Now, nobody was arrested. Why? The other day, we just a month ago, we had coaches wanted to leave Messina and also Palabora, they were stopped by the taxi operators, questioning the validity of the permits, and a warrant officer of the police came and said, we must stop the service because the situation is getting out of hand. So, I am of the firm opinion that ANC, the police, over many years, has deteriorated to a situation where lawlessness is in the order of the day. It's not the exception anymore. It is at order of the day. And people on Australia, we had one of the, I wouldn't mention his name, but you can go and watch the record of the portfolio committee, a member of the ANC, that's a member of the portfolio committee, the police portfolio committee in Parliament. When he came on, he made a comment and he said that, before 1994, if people were to see a police car, they would run, even though they've done nothing wrong. But nowadays, the crime are being committed in front of the police. They still, they do nothing.
And I'd just like to say, I hear that and I understand that what is hopefully being relayed is about law and order being enforced, but I hope there's no praising of an apartheid system that was oppressive, that committed dire human rights violations in South Africa.
Look, the human rights are being violated as we sit here today. Okay, my passengers, and I say my passengers because, we are loyal to our passengers and our passengers are loyal to us. Through the Eastern Cape. They 99% are people of color. And I'm fighting this fight on behalf of them, on behalf of everyone in South Africa, every citizen of South Africa and cross-border citizens. Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique. We service all these in these countries and for the last 45 years. So my fight is for the man in the street and to say justice is not being served here. Bankie Khaya died in vain. He did an honest man's job, and they killed him for what?
And who's Bankie Khaya? Was one of your workers?
He's one of our drivers. He was shot in front of my office. His wife came the next day and she washed his blood from the tar and from the cement at our offices the next morning early. Those are heartbreaking scenes.
100%. And I think this is why we wanted to talk to you, to get the human face angle behind it, to actually understand why ordinary citizens in this country are prevented from being able to exercise what should be a relatively safe mode of public transport. But we really do thank you for sharing your plight, your concerns with us, and what you believe needs to be done about it. This is exactly why we thought it an interesting story that deserved for the public to hear exactly what is going on. That there is the Intercape CEO just speaking to us about how bad the situation is that they're facing. Intercape is the long-haul South African bus operator. The CEO, Johan Ferreira, was speaking to us there. It's just about 18 minutes to 10.
Se é um artista em exceção que procura mostrar a sua música a um público mais vasto, ou apenas procura promover a sua música na rádio, podemos ajudá-lo a aumentar as suas hipóteses de sucesso. Envie sua música para music@channelafrica.co.za. Para tal, precisamos das seguintes informações: rótulo, código ISRC, título, artista, compositor, editor, autor, linguagem, gênero. 3. Escute sua música, trilha sonora da nossa rádio, perfeita para melhorar o seu dia. Com Channel África e a sua música, você nunca ficará entediado. Experimente o melhor da música africana na perspectiva africana.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
And we are live here on Channel Africa in Auckland Park at our offices here in Johannesburg. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Magwetla, bringing you the very latest, what is happening in and around your world, wherever you are. One of the top stories that we've been covering from here in Gauteng today is South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. He has sought to allay fears that South Africa's HIV/AIDS program is on the brink of collapse following the United States government withdrawal of funding. He says despite the created financial gap, the program remains stable and government is engaging with potential funders to plug the shortfall. Motsoaledi was addressing the media in Pretoria on Thursday. Phumzile Mlangeni was there.
According to Stats SA, South Africa has the highest number of people living with HIV in Africa. Almost 8 million people are estimated to be living with the virus. The country allocates almost 47 billion rand annually to its HIV/AIDS program, of which close to 8 billion is funded through the US President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. The sudden funding withdrawal by the US has sparked concern among experts and activists who warn of dire consequences of South Africa's HIV/AIDS program. However, Motsoaledi insists the program is not at risk of collapse.
It is inconceivable that out of 46.8 billion rand spent by the country on HIV/AIDS program, the withdrawal of 7.9 billion by President Trump will immediately lead to a collapse of the entire program. We believe it's inconceivable. Ladies and gentlemen, we must put it categorically clear that under no circumstances will we allow this massive work performed over a period of more than a decade and a half to collapse and go up in smoke because President Trump has decided to do what he has done.
PEPFAR was supporting the health department in 27 high-burden HIV/AIDS districts across 8 provinces, covering 2,700 public health facilities and 12 specialized clinics operated by NGOs. Following the funding withdrawal, files of patients receiving care at these clinics were moved to nearby public facilities. Motsoaledi says all 63,000 patients previously supported under the PEPFAR-funded program have now been transferred.
And we can confirm today that all 63,322 files belonging to this key population were moved to public health facilities. Then the work to conduct their owners to transfer them to public health facilities where their files are started in earnest and it still continue.
The funding cut has also led to job losses. Of the 217,000 people working on the program nationwide, around 15,000 were supported by PEPFAR. So far, 8,000 have already lost their jobs, with another 7,000 employed through the Center for Disease Control expected to be retrenched by September.
At the present moment, all we can do is to present our plans to funders. And I've given you a long list of funders we have met. There's not a single one who said, no, we won't help. But up to today, there's not a single one who came to the party. Either private funders or governments around the world. There's not a single one. At the moment, the only one who came to the party, Global Fund, came to the party with 1 billion rand, only for ARVs and nothing else. So I'm not going to stand here in front of you and claim that we have got any plan for the 8,000 people.
Motsoaledi says despite the challenges, antiretroviral treatment will not be affected and government continues to engage with global funders to close the gap. Phumzile Mlangeni, SABC News, Pretoria.
And it brings the time to 14 minutes to 10, as usual here on Africa World Hour. Most of the days, some of the days when we can bring you something that's very interesting, we do that at the 21:40 slot. So today we bring you something that is to not only lighten your mood, but get you into that weekend spirit. So we taking you on a virtual journey to one of South Africa's most breathtaking destinations. We're thrilled to have with us Shaun Ingalls. He is the general manager of the esteemed Grootbos Nature Reserve Hotel. Shaun, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Pisa, so good to be with you this evening, and I'm glad we're the good news section of your show tonight.
I think everybody needs a little bit of good news. There's something about the mid-year fatigue that I see is kind of settling in for a lot of people, and a lot of us just kind of go on a daydreaming bender, and we start thinking of places that make us feel good, uplift our moods. And I saw the story and I thought it was quite interesting. The Condé Nast Traveller Spain Awards. So your hotel has been nominated as a finalist for this Best Hotels in Africa category for the 2025 Condé Nast Traveller. So I was thinking, as it's the Traveller Indaba, what South Africa normally does, it of course brings together all kinds of exhibitors to look at what South Africa or Southern Africa can host. And I thought this would be a good conversation. So tell us about this accolade that you've been nominated for.
Yes, absolutely. It came as a bit of a surprise to us as well. And we've just come back from the Travel Indaba today, and we've learned this news and are so humbled and really just thrilled at this international nomination. These awards are great to highlight opportunities for African properties to just show their wares, and we're delighted.
And I've never been, but I've seen pictures of it. It seems to be quite an interesting place. So it's a nature reserve, but you also offer luxurious accommodation and various things to do. So you've got a bit of bush, you've got a bit of beach. Tell us about this wonderful place.
Well, you definitely have to find your way down here sometime. So for those of the listeners and viewers that don't know where we are, we're situated almost at the southern tip of Africa. And if you walk into any of our lodges, the first thing that you see is this amazing vista of Walker Bay, the ocean and Walker Bay in front of us. And Walker Bay is where, on the one side is Hermanus, and this is where the whales come in coming up now in the winter months. And they'll be coming to their calves, the southern right whales. But as you creep back from the ocean towards our lodge, there's this band of green, and that's where the magic happens, because we're in the heart of the Cape Floral Kingdom. And for those that don't know, the Cape Floral Kingdom is the smallest but most diverse plant kingdom in the entire world. So we are just so blessed, I suppose, to be situated in this part of the world. And we showcase this to our guests. So the guests that stay with us, and thank you for saying it's a beautiful place, they stay in this beautiful accommodation, and they get to go out and experience what's in front of us, and that's the Fynbos. We do reserve drives with them. There's horse riding. There's walks through the ancient milkwood forests. We have what we call our Florilegium, which is a collection of botanical art housed in the only dedicated botanical art gallery in the Southern Hemisphere on the property. So all these experiences come together in the most unique way, and that's where the magic happens. Throw then in some amazing food, and we do a lot of botanical influences in our food as well, taking elements of the Fynbos into the food, and then pair it with some amazing wines. We've got 2 beautiful maturation cellars where we get some of the most unique wines in South Africa through the Cape Winemakers Guild. So it's a wonderful offering. We enjoy it.
So, and I want to look at the uniqueness of the fauna and flora. So, there's a game reserve nearby. Am I correct in understanding that one can experience wildlife and also look at a unique array of flora, as it's called Grootbos anyway?
Well, the name Grootbos comes from the original farm name, and it refers to the milkwood forest on the property. It's not a game reserve as such, and that's where the difference and the uniqueness comes in. It's a botanical reserve.
Okay.
And because we are in this floral diversity, we have over 1,000 different plant species on our reserve alone, 7 new discovered to science. So that is the sort of catalyst of the experiences that people get. And we often have it where people say, I'm not going on a flower safari. Are you crazy? But it's not about that. It's about understanding the ecosystem, understanding all the elements that work together to create that ecosystem, whether it's the insects or the plants or the animals, and how it all fits together. The history of the area, the geology. We're sitting on a coastline where there's such archaeological importance for the whole of South Africa, and there's caves along the coast near the reserve that are just fascinating. So a whole lot of different experiences on the go.
So just listening to you, my mind's already in mind travel gear. I'm thinking about that. But most importantly, from the perspective of conservation and sustainability, two things that I'm personally very passionate about. So tell us about the work that you do and why you make it special for even your guests while they enjoy the luxury.
Well, that sustainability word has become quite contrived over time, I think, and right. A lot of people think that sustainability really just has to deal with the eco version of what we do at the lodge, which we do. We run off solar, we monitor our waste, our water, literally everything there. But for us, the sustainability is really about the community around us. So we have a foundation. The Grootbos Foundation's been working for 25 years within the communities around us, and that is where the heart of Grootbos lies. We deal with over 2,500 kids throughout the year on different sport programs, and you think, how is sport involved with Grootbos? But we've realized that through sport, you have a captive audience in kids, so you can help shape their destinies. And we have cricket, we've got netball, we've got rugby, female rugby. There's an amazing women's empowerment program where we empower young teenagers. We teach them how to surf. So we take them into the waves, but the program is designed to empower them in their futures. And then we have early childhood development involvement. We've got entrepreneurship programs. So from a guest perspective, coming to Grootbos, you really get an opportunity, and especially international guests who want to get in an understanding of how South Africa works. There's a great opportunities to get involved there. On the conservation side, we're looking after this plant kingdom, this Cape Floral Kingdom, which is always under threat. And that's our key objective. And through that too, there's amazing guest experiences. We've got 4 entomologists on the property studying the insects. They've pinned over 60,000 insects to try and identify them. We've got biologists, we've got botanists on the property, zoologists. It's really about discovering as much as we can about the reserve that we're on. And it's been an incredible journey over the last 30 years that Grootbos has been in existence.
So it really sounds like it's a holistic experience, Sean. So what do you think? And there's a lot that you have already described that is just quite phenomenal, because one would not think that there'd be such a richness, such wealth in what would ideally be a getaway holiday experience. So what do you think resonated with the Condé Nast Traveller Spain Awards as they nominated you to be the finalists?
So, Pisa, I think what's happened in the world today, and maybe it's post-pandemic in a way, but people are looking for something different. And a lot of international travelers obviously come to Africa and South Africa for the Big Five experience. But we're not about a cookie-cutter experience. It's about an immersion in nature, an experience where you can escape, where you can experience something unique and different. And I think that's what really touched the Condé Nast team. They felt that, there's that sense of feeling when you come to Grootbos, this overall immersion in something so unusual and unexpected. And we're just so blessed to be able to showcase that to the people that come and visit us.
And for your team, What has this experience of this nomination been like for them? What does it make them feel about not only their work, their contribution, but you all as a community? Because you must be, if you having so much that you're working on in what some would just see as a luxury experience. But as you say, there's so much incredible work that you're doing.
It's such a wonderful validation for all that work that's happened over time. And we've never done it to get recognition, but it's wonderful to get that recognition. And I think even more wonderful for a country like South Africa to have these nominations where you suddenly realize that there's diversity that in travel, and that South Africa isn't only about the animals in the game reserves, it's about so many things in between. And that's the magic of South Africa, isn't it? There's just so much that one can experience from the north right down to the south. And we just celebrate that when we have these awards, because we're just a tiny little reserve at the southern tip of Africa.
Tell you what, Sean, I will definitely make sure that it is on my list to visit this year sometime soon. It sounds like such a breathtaking experience, but I also love the idea that just by visiting you, one is giving back to the community. So thank you very much for taking this time to speak to us.
Tshepiso, always a pleasure, and we look forward to having you.
All right, thanks, Sean. Sean Ingalls is the general manager of Grootpoort Nature Reserve Hotel. They've just been nominated, in fact, as part of the finalists of the prestigious Condé Nast Traveller Spain Awards. As you heard him say, they are situated in the southernmost tip of Africa, and you get to have a little bit of both bush and beach, beautiful scenes. And that brings the time to 2. Let's make that 2. Cut off the 10. 2 minutes to 10. Shayla Ndukumane in the studio with us to tell us what's going to be happening on Hotlines this evening.
Ma'am, so in the very first hour, we speak to a woman who I think embodies excellence. I told you we are on this excellence journey, right? So she wore 2 uniforms for a very long time. One of a nurse and the other of a student, a medical student. And she's just graduated. Her name is Nazo Daniso. And she's from the KZ. No. She's from the Eastern Cape, in actual fact. And so we're going to be talking to her about that journey. You know, more often than not, we quit. It's too tough. It's like, why am I doing it? I'm a nurse already. Why do I need to push to be a doctor? And so that story for me was really beautiful. Secondly, do you dance much? Do you?
When the mood grabs me. Just put the right music and hey.
I love that, because tomorrow is International Dance Day. And so we're going to be finding out what's happening across the continent, more specifically looking at Johannesburg. I understand that there are festivals happening under our noses, and we're not even a part of it.
Well, you better find us some tickets then, honey.
So that we can go dance, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, looking forward to that. Shayla Ndukumane with Hotlines and the team. Well, from us, thank you so much for joining Africa World Hour. Until the next time, it's goodbye for now. And by the way, we will be bringing you more news live from the World Health Assembly, as we've been speaking about ACAT's funding, its impact not only on South African health services, public health care, but we'll also see what other African countries are contending with when it comes to those ODA cuts and how it's impacting on